Well, welcome to part 2 of this IT management series on endpoint control. In this particular segment, we're talking about using agentless technologies to actually resolve some of the issues associated with registry keys, services, and processes, those things that are so essential within a Microsoft infrastructure. By way of introduction, I'm Bill Keyworth, Vice President and Principal Analyst at ptak-noel-associates. And with me today is Dave-Roudebush, Executive Vice President at promisec. Welcome, Dave, and thank you for participating in this interview. Basically, what we want to talk today about your experience, your perspective on endpoint issues associated with managing and securing an IT infrastructure, particularly the Microsoft environment. You've talked about the power of the Microsoft environment. You've talked about the idiosyncrasies and nuances that that power creates. But what is it in the architecture of these applications that make it so that these things, these issues that we're talking about, these nuances aren't going to go away?
Oh, it's very simple. In the Windows environment, from everything you own, from your antivirus, your patch, your encryption, to the Word products you use, to the email products, they all have a high dependency of process, services, reg keys, and they must work in concert always. And the moment any one of those things are disrupted, and sometimes, Bill, depending on the application, we can talk about hundreds or thousands of lines of code. When something gets disrupted, the product doesn't work correctly. And in the Windows world, because when something goes wrong on the endpoint, it can't talk back to the server many times. Sometimes it can, but a lot of times it can't. So the first time I know there's a problem was when the phone rings. And when the phone rings is when I and IT or security go into a reactive mode. And reactive modes are what's driving costs through the roofs right now. And I think the truth is in the new world, in the new market where we're dealing cloud computing or just managing our IT and security more effectively, there's got to be a new shift. And the shift is, how do I go from being reactive, waiting for the phone to ring, to proactive, finding a problem before we experience it through our help desk. And again, things as simple as something being disrupted on a single endpoint is one problem I deal with. Something that disrupts that one endpoint and then propagates across a lot of different endpoints, like a virus or a worm, that's a bigger challenge.
Okay. So if I'm thinking of ways that the industry needs to work around some of the nuances associated with registry keys, processes, and services, which are essentially agents, is that what an agentless technology is doing things without the use of those three elements?
Well, that's actually, that's a great question. And it kind of opens up a Pandora's box right now. And it's kind of interesting you ask that, because agentless has become the hot buzzword. Everybody's trying to be agentless. Everyone's talking about agentless. Because nobody wants to add something else to a computer, because the cost, the risk. But the truth is, in most cases, it's important to define what agentless means now, because agentless sometimes means just don't add anything else to the endpoint. And there's two ways of looking at agentless today. The most common way, the easy way that everyone's flocking to because it's a quick way to be able to say you're doing agentless, is to leverage one of Microsoft's core products or capabilities, WMI. It allows you not to have to add something to the endpoint, but use some of that code to actually look and measure and monitor what's taking place on the endpoint. The problem with that, if you just do a health check on WMI, how well is that working on an endpoint? I've seen as low as 5 to 10%. I've seen as high as 50% of WMI is not configured right on the endpoint. More importantly, the architecture of that tends to be a little bit chatty, a little bit loud on the network, and a little bit loud on the endpoint, meaning it can slow things down quite a bit, or it can clog down your network. So that is a kind of a first step look at how to do agentless technology. It doesn't work real well, because if you have to ask a lot of questions constantly, what tends to happen is you slow down the network, you slow down the endpoint, the user complains, and then you throttle it back like so many other applications. Just think, how many products do you own that use in 2 or 3% of the capabilities? Most. When you move into a agentless-based strategy, leveraging WMI, you're kind of it's kind of a middle ground.
Well, moving beyond the issues of agentless, what is it about agentless that makes it a hot topic right now? What are the benefits of agents when you're managing and securing?
A couple
endpoints?
Simple things, very, very simple things. One is there's nothing more to add. Our computers have so many products and so many applications running on them today. Nobody wants to add another product that I have to support, another product that may cause conflict with something else that I'm leveraging, another cost. Something that's going to slow down the machine a little bit more because people can't upgrade hardware quite the way they used to because of the economic times. So nobody is excited about adding another product, installing something else on the endpoint. If there's a way to independently check and monitor what's taking place on the endpoint, that's what people are looking for today. And that's basically the framework of what agentless is today.
The ability to monitor, to measure, to manage without having to go and attach something to the endpoint. Well, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think the generic definition of agentless is nothing to install on the endpoint. It's that simple of an answer.
Agentless is an alternative to agents, but why? What does it do for you that agents don't do?
Well, the first thing, it doesn't have the dependencies on the process service and reg keys that so many things do, and that tends to be the Achilles heel. That's the weakness. So it avoids the weakness. That's a really critical element of it. Secondly, it doesn't require you to install anything. It doesn't require something to be supported on the endpoint. It doesn't require you to do constant patches and updates. Yet it allows you to effectively and efficiently measure, monitor, and in certain cases change what's taking place on the endpoint. If things aren't working the way they should be, do I want to dispatch a technician? Do I want to get a phone call, log it in the help desk system, and then go out and actually send somebody to solve the problem? What if I can do it all in one step? What if I can find the problem, document the problem, notify the help desk so it's logged properly, but actually correct the problem? All without being dependent on something to be installed and working correctly.
I assume we're not talking about some kind of agentless scanning device that's required here, that there's something that's needed to both analyze and subsequently fix or remediate the problem.
Absolutely. And I think in today's economy, in today's market where people are taxed when the budgets aren't quite the way they used to be, the right answer is, how do I make what I have work better? Is there not a correct way to blend agent and agentless strategies to make the tools I own work all the time? And to get the value out of what I've already spent money on versus to go through the costly rip and replace strategies of bringing in another tool that in fact has the same core issues. And when things go wrong, which they always go wrong, we're the most effective way of finding it, documenting it, and fixing it. And that's really the blended future, I think, of agent and agentless technology.
Dave, thank you for taking the time in this interview today. Thanks for sharing the endpoint issues that are associated with the strength of the Microsoft operating environment and the need to complement agent technologies or registry keys, processes, and services with the benefits of agentless technology. Much appreciated.